Jesus' call to God's children is not a call to a static condition. I base that on Luke 9:23, where we see the call to forward motion in the words, "Come after me and follow me." "If any man will come after me, let him take up his cross daily and follow me." The phrase "take up his cross daily" is also an activity of constant motion. In the simplest terms, it is a call to continual forward movement. I quote Robert Mulholland Jr. in the book Invitation to a Journey. When spirituality is seen as a static possession, the way to spiritual wholeness is seen as the acquisition of information and techniques that enable us to gain possession of the desired state of spirituality. There is in the church today a restless quest for programs and techniques. Churches invest many hours and much money in traveling to churches that appear to have a program that works. It may well be that they have something that does work in their area and in the culture of that area. It is highly unlikely that such programs and methods will be successfully transplanted to another area. I was assigned by a church to travel to another part of the country to study what a specific church was doing. It was a highly exciting adventure as I watched that church do very well what it had found to be workable. I took it back to the church leadership at home, but there was no one in the church who was willing to put effort into the program that was successful in the other area. The church I was in did not have anyone with that particular vision for that style of ministry for our area. It is imperative that we strive to follow Jesus Christ where we are, in the culture we know, where we can urge people to follow Christ and do the urging on a consistent basis. You cannot follow someone and stay in the same place, physically or spiritually. It seems to me that if the follower of Christ comes to a standstill in development, he or she will regress. Our goal in ministry cannot ever be to see people attain a certain plateau of spiritual existence. Our intent in ministry must always be to see spiritual movement and growth. How will that passion show itself? I told one gentleman what the difference was between me and him in terms of relationships. I said to him, when we meet people, you see fault, while I see potential. I have a lot of growing to do in that area, but generally that's where I want to be. If you're listening as a church leader, you have probably been asked or heard someone ask, where do we find good church leaders? Finding good church leaders is not a good pursuit at all. The question ought to be, how can we develop good leaders? Here's the solution. We find someone with potential and a desire to follow Jesus, and we work with them to help them grow. The Christian experience should never be stagnant. In fact, it probably cannot be stagnant. I remind you of what I said earlier, that it seems to me that the Christian who is not growing is regressing. Stagnant water does not generally look good, smell good, or appeal as drinking water. John 4:14 says, "But whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life." John 7:38. "He who believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." I challenge anyone to find anything stagnant about that description of water. We do not generally seek to sit by a pool of stagnant water. There is something about the sound of water rippling over rocks or whatever else is on the stream bed. There is also the realization that the flowing water is fresh. It has a rejuvenating effect on those sitting or walking close by. I walk or bike on a trail that runs alongside a creek in the city of Brockville. It is a pleasure to stop and enjoy the sound and the sight of the water flowing over a slight drop in the creek bed. Jim Cantillon said on a television program that discipleship is the discipline of following Jesus. I place the emphasis on following. That's a good commentary on Luke 9:23, where the call is to follow. That implies very strongly that there is motion involved. Where there is motion, there is a destination. If I exercise discipline in some area of life, it seems to me that there is activity toward an objective. I cannot point to a definition of the word here, but it seems to me that if I practice discipline in something, I am fully engaged in a process. The phrase, "come after me," does not denote intention, but ongoing action. It might be good to focus on intention at this point. Intention is something most people are well acquainted with. Dallas Willard, in the book Renovation of the Heart, said, "Intention is brought to completion only by a decision to fulfill or carry through with the intention." Good intentions are very quickly forgotten as other areas of life come into focus. Just think of the many times you have heard people make New Year's resolutions, which do not seem to work. One may leave a church service and have every intention of following through on something that has been brought to his or her attention. But as we move out of the building, there are a myriad of issues that get our attention. And the intention, good as it was, is quickly forgotten, or at least put on the back burner. Good intentions are powerless and quickly fall victim to procrastination. Procrastination is the enemy of intention. Jesus has intentions for his followers, and he will follow through on them. He comes through because of the end product he has in mind. We need to develop the same commitment to following through on good intentions in ministering to others. We will do this more effectively if we have someone hold us accountable. In Matthew 14:22 to 36, Jesus demonstrates following through on intention. After feeding the 5,000 men plus women and children, he constrained the disciples to get into the boat and go to the other side of the lake. The word used is not that of suggesting, but constraining. His intention was very definitely for them to cross to the other side, indicating purpose. His intention was not for them to drown in the middle of the lake, but to cross to the other side. It is unfortunate that they did not share his commitment to intention. When the storm arose, they did not show confidence in his intention, but became afraid of the storm. Perhaps that is why he went up to the mountain to pray, knowing that in their humanity they would lose perspective. Let me say here that God is not mean, but God is dangerous. He may put us in situations that are scary, but he will be there all the way. Electricity and nuclear power are also very dangerous, but both are safe in and of themselves and very productive. Both have the power to be dangerous or to be very productive. Jesus followed through on his intention, and if we follow him, we want to have that same quality. My point is, in this little sidelight, to point out that we need to commit ourselves to follow through on intention. This will require forward movement as we pursue following Christ. In pursuing Christ, there has to be an ongoing, unassailable commitment to an objective. That is an important quality for us in our personal pursuit of pleasing God. We also need to have objectives for other followers of Christ. In the pursuit of that objective for others, we must invest in their spiritual well-being and growth. That is where intentional, relational discipleship becomes the means of effective ministry to others. We need to make a commitment to others to assist them in the growth process. You need to commit yourself to being the one who will teach, encourage, and motivate others in their pursuit of Christ. To follow me, in the words of Jesus, is to fall in line with a divine purpose. I illustrate that commitment to a purpose with a story out of Ecuador. My wife and I took 3 of our children to Ecuador for a 2-week vacation with a missionary couple who lived and worked in that country. We were in a small village outside of Shalmera, at the entrance to the jungle. We were walking on a dirt road when we saw 2 distinct black lines across the road ahead of us. As we came near, we noticed ants carrying foliage from one side of the road to the other, from left to right. The same foliage was on both sides of the road, so I had no idea why they were doing it. As we watched them cross with foliage over the road to the right side, we noticed them coming back just a foot from that line, going from right to left, going for another piece of foliage. We heard a vehicle coming up behind us and watched as it drove over the 2 lines of ants and crushed those that were in the path of the tires at the time. What was most interesting was watching those ants coming up to the point of carnage. As they reached that point, we watched them circle a couple of times and then fall in line again. And before we knew it, the lines were functioning just as they had been. No matter what the issue, they were totally committed to the task of moving pieces of foliage from the left side of the road to the right side. They had to take a moment to refocus, then continued on with the assigned task that was theirs. That is the type of commitment we need to make to each other's spiritual growth and well-being. That happens in a lifestyle of intentional relational discipleship. If we could see that beginning to happen, we would see a profound change taking place in church culture. I encourage you to become a functioning part of that change process.